if you enter the space of conversational AI or any generative AI, right? If you do not have the human race building for the human race, things won't work. You actually will not get outcomes of capitalistic economic output. And there's a very simple reason for that, right? If you think about human-machine interaction, we've come from an era over the last 20, 30 years where we've used the web for humans and machines to interact. Then we had mobile. We are now in this natural language era, but the game is different. And it's the first time that machines have to understand human, because if you think about web and mobile interfaces, we had to learn how to click, swipe, right, close. But now we're going to speak in our own language and the machines have to understand us. And if that's true, then the people building these machines have to understand the humans. So my favorite example to give is, how do you expect a young white man sitting in Silicon Valley to design a conversational AI experience for a 50-year-old African-American woman going through menopause?
Hi everyone, it's Lauren Hawker-Zaffer. Welcome back to Redefining AI, the Tech Podcast. I'm an educator and I'm taking you on an educational exploration into the fascinating minds of those that embody and forefront all you need to know about artificial intelligence, machine learning, insight engines, and emerging tech. Now, today we're placing spotlight on conversational AI in an exciting episode called The Explosive Chatbot Trend. And to discuss this, I've been joined by Joti Balani. Joti Balani is founder and managing director of Freshriver.AI and is an award-winning creative architect who designs and delivers complex enterprise human and systemic transformations. She's created a multi-dimensional transformation framework which blends AI, data science, engineering, cybersecurity, and social science. Joti, she leads transformative innovations at Fortune 100 enterprises to create emotional, economic, and brand value with her team. Her team represents the empowered human race in all dimensions. Now, Joti, she also leads Open Voice Network's Industry Advisory Council to share her conversational AI framework with the industry and is the co-founder of Women in Voice New Jersey US chapter. So we'd like to give her a warm welcome today to Redefining AI. It's a pleasure having you here, Joti. Hi, and welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we're really excited. It's a very interesting topic that we're forefronting today. So we're looking at conversational AI, as we've mentioned, and certainly a topic that is ever present in the media and many different discourses, many different narratives. We're going to explore chatbots, everything that circles and carousels around conversational AI. How are you today?
Doing great. Been a busy week, but it's all exciting. Very, very exciting times we live in, for sure.
So I introduced you with a certain bio, which is certainly impressive. What do you want to tell us about yourself in your own voice?
So, the journey that I began in this conversational AI and data science space as deeply as I have been about 5 years ago. And prior to that, I came in from a 22-year-old corporate career where, I grew up as a software engineer, product development and marketing, reaching, executive ranks. But I realized that I think I have a spirit, before I leave this earth, I believe in the fact that we're all born into this earth with superpowers and we have a lifetime to uncover them, discover them, and solve problems, leaving the world behind in a better place than we found it before we go, right? I live by that philosophy. And so when I was exiting corporate and I said, what do I want to do next? I said, okay, I want to create a company where I would love to work, right? That there's human creativity and potential are respected and encouraged, because I think we have a lot of problems right now in how corporate world works. And so I said, okay, it has to be human first. So human first capitalism and activism is the main framework that I built the company on. And I said, as we enter this era of AI, and as you have rightly pointed out, we're an explosive part right now. AI was coming out of the hype cycle when I entered the space, and I realized the potential, and I knew the impact that was coming. to jobs, to humanity, the opportunity to make tons and tons of money. I mean, this is like trillions of dollars in market opportunity. But I said, it's got to be done the right way. And so I laid the foundation of a company that I said, it has to be where we treat humans with dignity. It has to be dignified work. They cannot be burnout because this is a very intensive field. And the people that handle AI and data have to be responsible human beings. And they have to represent the entire human race. Because interestingly enough, if you enter the space of conversational AI or any generative AI, right, if you do not have the human race building for the human race, things won't work. You actually will not get outcomes of capitalistic economic output. And there's a very simple reason for that. If you think about human machine interaction, we've come from an era over the last 20, 30 years where we've used the web for humans and machines to interact. Then we had mobile. We are now in this natural language era, but the game is different. And it's the first time that machines have to understand human, because if you think about web and mobile interfaces, we had to learn how to click, swipe, right, close. But now we're going to speak in our own language and the machines have to understand us. And if that's true, then the people building these machines have to understand the humans. So my favorite example to give is, how do you expect a young white man sitting in Silicon Valley to design a conversational AI experience for a 50-year-old African-American woman going through menopause? If you just stop and think about that and you go, oh, yes. So this whole diversity and inclusion thing is going to come to a head. People cannot just say, oh, we're sprinkling on for some checkbox that, you want to look good as a brand. You actually have no choice but to include that. So, from a framework standpoint, human first capitalism and activism, and then the way we create these services, people who are handling them have to think about the emotional, ethical, and economic intelligence that they are creating. So I just gave you sort of a 2-minute.
Yeah, that was certainly explosive. I think we've been overpowered ourselves with a lot of wonderful insight and information. So let's try and break some of that down for the audience. So a couple of things that you've mentioned that I'm sure will be of particular interest, and we can certainly go on to focusing on the framework, what you've mentioned, human first, capitalism and activism. One thing that we can maybe start with is that 5 years ago, you said that you realized the potential of AI, of the AI space. You mentioned that it's quite an intensive field. There's the possibility for burnout. You've mentioned about the whole maybe main importance of keeping the human at the core, or diversity at the core, inclusion at the core. How did you realize all of that 5 years ago?
So it came over the first 2-year period. When I exited the corporate world, I started doing lead architect roles for conversational AI for Fortune 100 clients, right? I went in independently and they said, hey, can you build us these conversational AI experiences? As I worked both with the business side and the technology side, I noticed that the approach that people were having to building this were very similar to how they were building mobile and web. And I said, well, that doesn't work, because from a technical standpoint, if you think about web and mobile, those are deterministic decision trees that we define to say, if the user does this, then do this, if then else statements. But with natural language processing, it's a very wide open field because the human can say just about anything. And so you have to consider not just decision trees, but a lot of where the human could go and how do you respond to that. And I realized that we are missing key roles in here. Conversation designers, for example, people who think about the human psychology and philosophy. This is where it also excites me, because I think the social sciences, linguists, people that have typically not had a role in technology, I think are going to be front and center. And so these insights came to me as I actually worked hands-on in delivering. Because, one of my superpowers I discovered over my corporate career was being able to think in multi-dimensions, right? All the factors that could potentially be needed to be molded in order to deliver an outcome. And so I would always keep an eye on what business outcome we were going for, and then working backwards and saying, how do you actually extract use cases? How do you go design and build them? So over the course of the last 2 years, I realized, A, this is a completely different field. B, the mindsets have to change for the people that are working on them. It cannot be just to drive, revenue or take cost out, but you have to think about the empathetic parts of how this will impact humans, as well as brand value, right? Because if things go wrong, the brand can be really, really hurt, right? So as I went through this process, I said, we're going to have a new framework on how to develop this, right? So that was insight number one.
Mm-hmm.
And insight number two was there was such demand for this talent. In 2020, I started in 2018, right? In 2020, I was getting 3 to 4 project offers a day from recruiters. Everything from chatbot developer to conversational AI designer to architects. And I said, I was pretty busy doing projects. And when you do these are intensive projects. So I would talk to these recruiters and they'd say, we can't find people. And I said, oh, there comes the supply demand rule of capitalism, which means we need to get more people in. Then the other insight I got is, well, typically, from a technology standpoint, if you outsource, India, parts of South America, right? There are places where you get tech talent from, but that's not diversity. You're going to have people from around the world across all gender spectrums, because otherwise we cannot actually deliver the economic capitalistic output that we need, like what I was talking about earlier. I said, oh. So I started training women. I started training young people. I ran a pilot incubation in 2020. And I said, let me see if I could train people in my framework and give them access to technology, because I have access to a lot of tech, mentor them and have them build me a product. And in 6 months, I had 10 people, 5 grad school interns and 5 women that I was mentoring through Women in Voice. They produced a proof of concept in 6 months. 10 people who had never touched conversational AI, didn't know much about it. The women thought that they were not techie enough and not STEM. I said, just throw all that out and just focus on the problem that has to be solved. They produced it. So that showed to me that we have to think about talent production in a different way. So all these insights came from me doing.
Mm-hmm. So if we go back to the start of that thread and how you've introduced this insight that you found through the experience that you were given with the Fortune 100 organizations, and they asked you at the start, obviously, to build this conversational AI experience. We've been mentioning the word conversational AI quite a lot. And you also just mentioned there that the women that you were mentoring, they weren't really sure if they understood conversational AI, what it was. Let's try and define that term first of all. So just to work with an aligned definition, what should our audience understand when you in particular speak of conversational AI? Is it a chatbot? Like, what is conversational AI?
Sure. So this is under the umbrella of what's called generative AI. The media has been a buzz about generative AI, ChatGPT, large language models, right? In very simple terms, everybody knows that humans and machines, right? These things, what we're on, human-machine interaction, basics. And you say, well, how do machines and humans interact? Well, the internet was born about 25 years ago. Then web came along and we all learned, how to use computers, the PC, that whole wave of history. And then mobile started rising. But in each case, humans had to learn how to go use this. The third wave of human-machine interaction that has arrived is called natural language processing, natural language understanding, natural language generation. Conversational AI is that blanket term that says, how do you leverage AI where the machine can understand the human in their natural language? It could be any language, English, the many, many, many languages we have around the world, but also contextually what we mean. Because as you know, language and culture go together, right? So think of conversational AI as the next frontier that has already arrived for human to machine interaction. And the machines are only as smart as they are trained in emotional, ethical, and economic intelligence. That's the way to think about it. Because, terminology is not stated now, but that's what we have seen. When I work with it, that's how I describe it. So ChatGPT, just to sort of connect the dots to what everybody's hearing in the media. So ChatGPT is where conversational AI, this natural language interface, was put in front of these large language models. So GPT-3, OpenAI has been working on this for the last couple of years, right? But only when they added this natural language interface to it, were the masses able to access it, right? Before this, it was pretty limited to a small community of people who had to go figure out how to go work with these models, right? By adding the chat component, it allowed accessibility to explode. And so now there's going to be an entire ecosystem building. People are trying to figure out, startups, everybody and their mother and brother are trying to figure out how to incorporate it, right? But the word chat comes from one channel of the human machine interaction, which is I'm chatting with somebody. But conversational AI covers every sense that the human has, whether they are typing it, chatting, or they are speaking it. There's also other sensory, like computer vision can come into this, where the machine can understand based on, where your eyes are moving, what do you mean, your facial expressions, etc. But conversational AI is human machine interaction and how we communicate with it. I want to add one more dimension because you did mention chat bots. Okay. The machine automation is on a spectrum at and I lovingly say this, dumbest end of the automation spectrum are robotic process automation. Going up a little bit higher are chat bots, which are, the older version of where we are right now. And at the extreme end of the spectrum are AI assistants, very cognitively mature machines that can understand context. They are not sentient while they appear to be. So those of us, the ones that are, communicating with ChatGPT, are quickly realizing that, wow, this is amazing, because it is amazing that humanity has landed at this point in history, that some model with billions and billions of parameters has been trained to help humans currently be able to search using conversational AI. But it's not where it's sentient, right? There's this whole big debate around, are machines sentient? And you can make them appear to be, but people are realizing, it does have limitations. Of course it has limitations.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that that's a really nice illustration that you've outlined there of the sort of scale of the division in cognitive capabilities. And obviously with the last one that you outlined with the AI assistants and the most cognitively mature, what should we then understand by that? What does that entail?
So the platforms that we have that are commercially available are all in different states of maturity where you can create AI assistants, right? So there are over 2,000 vendors with this technology in this space. You can pick up a Gartner report and it'll tell you who they are, right? And there are leaders in the market. Each of them is pushing the frontier in saying, how easily can humans leverage their platforms in order to give birth to and grow these AI assistants? So these platforms have got different architectures, right? They have to have the ability for humans to have this UI, UX interface. How do I actually go create this AI assistant? How do I continuously train them? Can it understand language? So every vendor has selected where they want to be. But the big question is, are they black boxes? I am not a fan of black boxes, because as I've encountered that over the projects that I was doing in my early years, I said, I cannot predict what this AI assistant is going to say or do. And that doesn't work, because I can't have my client's brand at risk if I cannot ensure with certain parameters that it will not gaslight the person using it, which is what's happening right now, right? You know what happened?
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, are we at a stage where we really can ensure that we're 100% certain that it is not going to sort of gaslight in that sense? I mean, I don't think we really are we?
So the analogy I give people, because everybody gets this, I said, think about electricity. There's a reason why the fuse was invented, right? Because anytime a game-changing technology arrives, everybody's in a frenzy and they jump on it. Why? Because humans want to figure out how to monetize it and capitalize it, right? Which is happening right now. So we are in the phase of, imagine when electricity was first created, people will get electrocuted, right? People will figure out how to use it, how to harness it, and all sorts of things will happen, which is what's happening right now. And so the frenzy that's occurring will continue on for some time, maybe another year or so, till people figure out what is real, what is actually usable versus not, and how to harness it. And that includes regulatory, right? Privacy, There's so much to figure out. Legal.
Very much so.
You probably heard this, right? Artists are suing these platforms that are doing generative AI artwork. The data that they used to train was copyrighted. Right? This is the kind of stupidity that's going to happen. It's going to happen. So we're going to step back and say, we're not going to lose our heads over it. Cool heads have to prevail. Myself and my team, I tell everybody, do not be enamored by these big technology things that arrive at us. These are shiny new objects. Keep your head and always think about the problem you need to solve and have a strong framework of ethics, emotional intelligence. And that's why I created the framework. I said, if we do not consider these aspects, we're going to get burned for sure, right?
And what would you say then is the main problem that it is trying to address? I mean, there's another couple of components that I want to cover as well. I want to come back to conversational design. It's something that you mentioned at the start. That's a huge component of conversational AI. But let's focus first on what problem do you really think that ChatGPT, etc., generative AI in this format is actually trying to address?
So it's interesting how you asked the question. So the problem we've got with people who handle technology, and I'm a technologist, right? So I grew up as a software engineer.
Yeah.
And I say, I've never looked at tech as a hammer looking for a nail. What we have is we have to use our imaginations to imagine a world, the house that we want to live in. What's happening right now, just like every historical wave we've gone through with every technology, this is not new, we've been here before. ChatGPT and similar technologies are being used as a hammer and people are looking for a nail. Oh, where can I go? I said, well, that's not the way to think about it. Think about the problems that you want to solve. Now you have these new tools to help go solve them. But be clear about your problem. What is the problem? Why it's a problem and for whom it's a problem? And what do you define as success? When you do that and you ask that question and you go, well, we now have these new capabilities that you can now completely reimagine how you solve that problem. That's what we do with every client. I do not allow anybody in the stakeholder team on the company, the client side, to talk about tech when we talk about the problem. We do not talk about the how. We talk about, are you clear about the problem you want to solve? What are the business outcomes that you are heading for? So you pick up the investor deck for any public Fortune 500 company. The first 5 slides will tell you what they are trying to do next. You take that, you work backwards, organizations, everybody's going to have their marching orders. You drill down and then you get to use cases and then you go deploy. But what people are doing is they're doing it the other way around. Here, take ChatGPT, go put it in everywhere that you want. People are literally just dropping these large language models. ChatGPT has an API now. They're going to plug it and they're going to say, let's see what happens. I said, you want to go do that? You can go do that. But you are putting your brand at risk because the people that use it on the outside, if they get gaslit, your brand could literally not recover from it. There's a database, actually, I want everybody to go look up. It's called the AI Hall of Shame. The link is on Wired Magazine. We tell our clients our primary job is to make sure your brand doesn't show up on it. It has governments on it. It has big tech on it. All the people, self-driving cars, where AI has gone horribly wrong with some pretty bad consequences, right? So people have to be very careful and thoughtful about how they're going to do it. And that's the space we play in.
Yeah, that's extremely good advice. So let's stick with that whole thoughtful component and go back then to conversational design. So it is a huge component of conversational AI. What do you feel are the key elements involved in conversational design, and where are areas for improvement in this particular component?
So conversation designers, have to have the background, right? Like I mentioned before, in linguistics, social science, they have to understand the human condition, philosophy and psychology, right? That's the first underpinning.
Can I just jump in there? Because I had a similar conversation and I find it fascinating as well. It seems like we've done this whole sort of 360 degrees turn. I mean, there was a lot of incentivization, there was a lot of encouragement, and it's not that this has been disregarded, and I'm not saying that it's not important, because it's extremely important, but there was a lot of movement for, individuals to be encouraged into STEM. And now, funnily enough, due to the sort of mass presence of generative AI, and again, in particular, ChatGPT, there's this almost turn on the narrative of, oh, actually, we need people who can think. We need people who are liberal arts students. We need people who have spent 4 years thinking about how we think and how we should think. Am I understanding correctly then, Joti, that this is what you're also underlining and putting prominence on?
100%. And I think they should have always been there through our, the last 20 years of the previous tech cycle, but they are getting highlighted. So the way I say it is they have to have an equal seat at the table. So in our company, my team, I say conversation designers have an equal seat at the table with technologists, right? Because I think tech has gone too far. It's been tilted in the wrong direction, which is why we've got issues around, if you think about it, addiction to phones, bullying, right? Because you didn't have people at the table telling you, by the way, you shouldn't do this because you're trying to get them, dopamine hits, etc. And look, the problem we've created, right? Every tech wave creates a new problem. That's always going to be the case. But you're right in thinking that there is demand, but there's also fear because generative AI has got two sides of the same coin. Is one, they do need people who know how to think. But on the other side, the same generative AI is replacing and saying, oh, our artist is going to be out of work. It's a conversation to be had, and it's all about mindset. So people who design conversations, apart from understanding the human condition, the philosophy, and the psychology, have to learn how to communicate with the techies, the developers. Because, like I said earlier, everybody has a different superpower, but we should be able to work together. It's like, I call it the Avengers, the superhero movies. You got to work together to solve the problem and be able to see it from each other's eyes, right? So I do believe we're headed in an era, which what gives me hope. Mm-hmm. We actively hire linguists, people with backgrounds in social sciences, because I said, you have got to balance out the technology and keep it in a place where we can do emotional and ethical intelligence, right? Tech has been used for capitalistic gain, 100% capitalistic gain. We haven't had enough of the other balance. So we're, I think, coming back to balance, but people have to think about it that way. But the good news is, Lauren, if people don't do that, it's not a nice to have, it will crash and burn. So you see, if this human machine interaction, if we don't have those people with social science, linguistic background at the table, you will never create a conversational AI experience that works well. Going back to my example, right? Having an African-American woman, 50-year-old menopause, trying to use this in conversation created by somebody who doesn't understand anything about her condition. You don't have a choice.
Of course. And where do you see the problem lying with the entry into understanding the importance of what you've just highlighted? Where is it not being understood? Like, why is it not being motioned harder or further than it is?
It's in our education system and our recruiting system. Both these systems have been broken for a very long time, and they have to get reinvented, and they don't have a choice for a variety of reasons. Primarily, the way our kids are being educated, and even workers that are being laid off, they have to be reinvented and reskilled and repositioned for these new jobs that are coming, but those dots are not connected. Right? The educational system is still working like it did 150 years ago. The recruiting system, good luck finding a job that, these job descriptions have not changed forever, right? At least 25, 30 years or even earlier. So they have not caught up with what is required in this new world, right? There's this gap. And that's also the other space we're working in, because we've got the program that I described in 2020. It's actually called a FAM program, Fresh River Apprenticeship and Mentorship. We don't advertise it. We hand select and curate, and people actually come to us on that, right? Because we're generating our own talent pool. We're actually working on taking that global and finding partnerships with universities and companies that want that kind of training to reskill. Otherwise, who's going to do it? I was at that EdTech conference last week. And that's what I talked about. They were talking about the same framework and making these little incremental changes. I'm like, guys, the framework is all broken. How are we going to get conversation designers? So Lauren, I can't hire directly from university. They have to be put in our training program for 6 to 9 months before they're ready to take on a junior level conversation designer role. You see the miss here now and the gap?
And this obviously aligns with the conversational AI framework that you've developed at your organization at Freshriver.AI. What do you hope that your own efforts are going to bring then there with the introduction and the implementation of this? Apart from maybe what we've touched upon, like what is your main desire, your main wish, the superpower that you see in that?
the World Economic Forum put out in their labor report in 2020, and they updated it last year in May, is by 2025, there will be 97 million new jobs where humans, machines, and algorithms will collaborate, and 85 million jobs will be eliminated. We're in 2023.
Interesting.
The time frame is shrunk. We don't have 20 years for these jobs to figure out and evolve, right? My vision and mission is to have those 97 million jobs represent humanity. Half those jobs should be occupied by women. And this is completely greenfield because these jobs are literally being created now as we speak. Prompt engineers for ChatGPT wasn't even a thing last year, right? Conversation designers wasn't a thing 3 years ago. So what I'm working towards, and this is part of my activism model that connects to the capitalism and the human first, is to say, I am collaborating with groups around the world, governments, saying governments who need money. Where are those 97 million jobs going to go? Whoever gets those jobs, their economies will lift. And I said, okay, if you want your economies to lift, you're going to have to invest. We're going to take this program global, and we will go create partnerships with institutions that are interested in these jobs and in producing, being able to enable mentorship and apprenticeship, because that's what teachers need to be, our mentors. And we need to provide apprenticeship because these jobs are sitting in these Fortune 500, 1,000 companies, right? Everybody wants to use AI. That's where the jobs are. So I said, all right, who's going to go figure this out? So I said, all right, we incubated it. We saw success at our level. And we have 3 actual professors, 2 computer science and a linguist professor as advisors to this program. We've got 2 folks from industry, senior leaders that have come in. They're going to help build this program and get this out there. So we're going to give it our best shot. I do believe we can get there, and we want to spread the word out, saying those 97 million jobs, responsible humans have to be in, and it has to represent the human race. That's really what I'm aiming for over the next couple of years.
That is extremely admirable, and it's wonderful to hear about what you're motioning, and certainly that you can see that you have a passion and a desire to really try and motion and help people understand that it's important that we keep humans first and that we are developing and help skill responsible humans. So I want to thank you for coming on the show today and sharing all of this information, the experiences that you've had up until now with us. I'm more than sure that our audience have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you for having me, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone else for listening today. If you'd like to find out more about AI, machine learning and search, then go to the Squirrel Academy at learn.squirrel.com. Thank you.